You're listening to Faith Connections Podcast, where we are dedicated to connecting you to your faith. And now your hosts, Chris and Mari Torres.
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to Faith Connections. Happy Tuesday.
And I hope y'all had an awesome Labor Day weekend.
Yes, yeah,
Labor
we
Day
were
for
off
all.
yesterday.
That's right, for all the
I
labor.
was off yesterday.
Yeah, I still had to work.
Wah, wah, wah. Welcome. We're excited that you have joined us today. We have a, pretty interesting topic to talk about today.
All of them are interesting.
All of them are interesting. I know. Every time I say it's an interesting topic, it's interesting because, it really is interesting. But, today we really want to talk about, and it's
Open
a segue.
conversation.
It's an open conversation, but it's really a segue to the topics that we have been talking about. And we really want to talk about denial.
The river?
No, not the river.
Oh,
Being in denial.
okay. Being in
So
I thought
denial.
the river in Egypt.
So, it's interesting because when you think about denial, what is the middle letter in the center of denial?
I.
It really kind of hit me as I was thinking of the word and, how it kind of plays out in our life. I know we talked about the I in pride and, all of that, and denial. Guess what? The I's right in the middle. And so denial is the action of declaring something to be untrue, right? I think it's interesting because Psychology 101, it's a coping mechanism that it's one of the mechanisms that we have, and we don't even realize that sometimes it's a defense. It's a defense mechanism that sometimes just kind of goes right into action, and we may not even realize that it happens. And it happened to me. I remember sitting with a neuropsychologist, and she blatantly told me, she goes, "You're in denial." And she was talking about me being in denial of my depression. Yeah, and it really hit me. And at first I didn't, I was like, denial? I was like, well, I'm not trying to deny that I'm depressed. I'm trying to overcome it, But I think, what denial, what it does, it kind of makes you doubt your own perception. The effects of it is hidden and could be unconscious. And I think that's exactly what was happening with me. Denial could sometimes oppose, it refuses, it challenges, and distorts reality. But it's a coping mechanism that sometimes we're unaware of, that our body just kind of, goes into that because we're not wanting to face either the distress feelings, our situation, or go back to, if it's a traumatic event, we're not really ready to face it. Maybe we don't even want to face the consequences. And so it's almost like we create this wall of denial and try to, and there's 4 stages of denial. I remember when I was taking psychology, they talked about it. And, I know suppression is one of them, when you just kind of suppress everything, and then eventually just leads to denial. They talked about psychosis. There's just so many different things that kind of play out. But what denial does, it really delays us facing the truth. And I think that's what happened, because when it's like I knew that I was having symptoms, or I knew that I had depression. I had never been diagnosed with it, before. I was diagnosed when I was there with her, but I felt like when she called it out and explained that it was a mechanism, it was a coping mechanism, and it was a defense mechanism, that, everything that I had gone through, it was just something that just kind of happened. And even though I'm trying to do my best and try to cover it up and overcome that, I needed to face reality, and I needed to come, to facing those feelings and kind of going through a process to be able to actually overcome and not just, think that I was overcoming. Yeah.
So, you said a couple of things that stood out to me, but as I was preparing as well, people who live in a state of denial will experience short-term consequences like feelings of isolation, anxiety, sadness. Some long-term consequences can include the feeling that you have never worked through your experience and that you may end up feeling perpetually stuck in it. So it's kind of like you're spinning your wheels. And in your situation, I think you wanted to get better, but you weren't getting better. And you just couldn't figure out what's triggering my depression or why am I feeling like this? You kept asking a lot of whys. I remember we would have those conversations, and it was it was just kind of one of those. We dealt with it as it came, so to speak. But I think ever since you went and saw the psychologist, and then when you did your little own therapy session with reading that book, it opened up your eyes to a lot of things. And since then, you've been better. You're doing great.
I feel like I've blossomed, right? Like I've actually, when you think about overcoming, and I think that's the thing. I thought I was overcoming it. Even years back when I was actually facing the trauma, right? Sometimes I think it was kind of like, well, I didn't have a choice. I had to continue to move forward.
So you were putting a front. And I think we talked about that, right?
Yes. Well, what it was is I wasn't overcoming. I was surviving. And there's a difference. There's a big difference. I wasn't overcoming. I was just surviving, right? So you need to ask yourself, are you truly overcoming something or are you just surviving? And that was key. I was surviving. I wasn't overcoming. And so then I just continued to live life. And all of a sudden, everything that was suppressed and kind of, hidden deep started coming to the surface. And it formed it shaped itself into...
It exposed itself
as depression, as fibromyalgia. And so, when, she shared about, me being in denial, I was like, okay, well then so great. Now I know what I have. It's called depression. And now I know how I can face it. And that's really, going back and facing the reality of my feelings, of processing my, my trauma and, kind of going through a grieving process. I feel like that's what kind of opened the door to true healing. And instead of surviving, I can actually move forward. Right?
And live that healthy life that God called us to live,
Yeah.
So there's a small group of professional researchers that see disorders such as depression from a social cultural perspective that argue that the solution to this is fixing a dysfunction in the society, not in the person's brain. So there's a lot of factors that probably play into your denial. You being always on the go, busy working, that played a factor of why you had to suppress those things. And it's like, I don't have time for this. I can't deal with this at this moment. I gotta wake up. I got kids to get ready. I gotta get to work. I'm a manager. I'm a supervisor. So I'm expected to be. I'm holding myself accountable. I'm holding myself up here because I have, subordinates and I got employees that I got to take care of, and I got to make sure this is run function. Because at the level that you're at, you're somebody of authority, somebody is superior. So you're being held accountable by higher ups. So therefore, you don't have time to deal with your depression, with whatever feelings that you were having. So that's why you were constantly having to move it. So your body got used to it, and you suppressed it for so long. And you were, even when you didn't feel like getting up and going to work, I remember you're always like, well, no, I have to put on a smile. I have to get up and show and put on a smile. And so a lot of it, that's why I mentioned earlier about a front. You were putting on a front, even though you may not have felt like going to work that day. Maybe you didn't feel like yourself, or something was bothering you, but you just didn't have time to deal with it. So you were putting that in the back burner. Yeah. And unfortunately, again, I've used this analogy many times, but it's that little tea kettle, pressure builds, things expose themselves, and it gets to a boiling point where the top blows off. And depression, unfortunately, when it peaks its head, it can have a long-lasting effect where you just want to lay up in bed, sleep, or you're crying, emotional. Yeah. And sometimes you don't even know why you're being emotional. But it's your body's defense mechanisms, again, trying to release that the suppression that you've had for so long. So psychologists again are saying that sometimes factors within our society, within our culture, play into our denial.
Yeah.
So that's why, and it was key for you had to have somebody from the outside and go and actually sit down with the therapist and blatantly tell you and call you out on, hey, you're in denial.
Yeah. And when she said that, I remember I even
Disbelief.
what? No, not necessarily disbelief, but it was kind of like, I was kind of shocked that like she just told me just straight up, and it wasn't rude. It wasn't in a disrespectful way. It was in an education, like in an educational way, right? It's
professional.
like professional, but educating me. But she was just so honest and transparent. And I appreciated that because it really made me, whoa, okay. And then when she explained it, and I'm unaware of, that this is a defense mechanism and it's also a coping mechanism and it's something, but when she explained to me what it was and what it had been doing in my life, man, that's when it really hit me. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. It does make sense. I keep just trying to get up and suck it up and, like everything's okay and everything's going to be great. And not saying that it won't be, because I have faith and hope. Absolutely. When you're a believer, that's what you cling to.
Right.
And that's exactly what I was doing. But it was at that where I came to a self-realization where I have to come face to face with the reality of the situation. And that is that there is trauma, there is things that I have not faced. I haven't even processed or emotions or grieved or anything. I didn't do any of that. And so I think that's why it's so important that, when we're faced with different situations, that we're able to express, we're able to, go to that support system, and be able to share and, cry, be angry, like process those emotions.
Correct.
So that we're not suppressing them or repressing them, and then see the effects of how it affects us, whether it's mentally, physically, or it manifests in many other different ways. When you think about addiction, right? So for those of you who are suffering from addiction or have suffered from addiction, this comes into play as well when you think about it, because you're never going to, move forward or overcome if you're in denial that you're addicted to something.
Right.
What happens with alcoholism, right? If you're addicted to alcohol, an alcoholic's not going to want to admit that he's an alcoholic.
Isn't there like a country song?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a country. It comes to mind. Sorry, it popped in my head.
Are you gonna sing to us?
No, I'm not gonna sing to us. But maybe we can play a little clip of that country song.
Maybe.
I got a drinking. They say I got a drinking problem, but I don't have.
Oh, yes.
Drinking. And that's what came to mind.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
The country
I know what song you're
yeah.
talking about.
So that's a perfect song if y'all get a chance to listen to it. I think it sings about denial.
I don't have a drinking problem.
Yeah, I have no problem drinking at all.
Yeah.
That's it. So but you're right. I mean, we are faced with in today's society pressures, especially with social media now. How quickly news spreads. How quickly we can bash somebody. Somebody will post something, and if everybody likes it, well, overnight sensation. If you post something negative or something bad, or somebody doesn't, man, it's like shark infested water. They'll eat you up. And sometimes those things, if we don't process certain feelings of what we're experiencing or going through, you're right. We repress them, and then we suck it up, and eventually that can affect us in the long term. So we have to process. We have to go through our emotions. If it's grieving, you have to grieve. You have to cry. You have to let it out. I know for us veterans that suffer from PTSD, the best thing is just talking. They say just talk. We can share our war stories, and many times it's with my fellow brothers and sisters who were there with me. We share stories, reminisce, or even with you guys. Sometimes I'll share some of the experiences that I went through. But that's also a helping coping mechanism for me to not allow PTSD to overtake my life and have control over me, right? So But yeah, I was thinking as you were saying, man, again, Jesus, the great example. He's always been the great example, but he showed emotion. There's several stories in the Gospels. When his friend Lazarus in the book of John, when his friend died, he shed a tear. He cried. He showed emotion. When he goes into the temple and he sees that the merchants have turned his father's house into the den of thieves, and he righteously flips tables, and they accuse him of rioting. And you're wearing that shirt today, right?
It's close to flipping tables.
That's right, like Jesus, right?
Like Jesus.
So that was an emotion. That's a human emotion he expressed. He was righteously angry because they had turned the temple, a place of worship, into a den of thieves. They were selling, and basically it's like going to we're down here in Poteet, Poteet flea market, or going to Trader's Village, right? A flea market. Well, if that's a place of worship, do we really need to be turned into that place? No. So Jesus was upset, and he righteously flipped tables. So that was an emotion. He processed that, and he expressed it, and that's a great example of Jesus showing emotion. So he cried. When his friend passed away, he got angry, and rightfully so, right? So again, we have to be able to process these emotions. I don't think he ever really truly showed fear throughout any of the Gospels. He didn't show any fear. His disciples did. I mean, being on the boat with the storms, they showed fear. Yeah. He was just sound asleep like a baby. Forget the storm. I know you slept through storms. We were just joking about that.
I sleep all the time.
Yeah, I think one time we had a tornado warnings, and you were sound asleep, and I was
like, wake me up if anything happens. So, but I'm gonna get my beauty sleep.
That's right. But yeah, we still have to. And I was the one being fearful, looking out the window, right? So we have to process, and we have to allow our emotions to play out. Because if not, then they creep up, and they can come in forms of depression. In this situation that we're talking about, and when you're in denial, you start denying things. Well, no. And again, the definition of denial is the action of declaring something to be untrue. Also, it says that the refusal of something requested or desired. So again, we start making excuses, and we start denying, and we start putting up a front. And then at that point, and it says here that many times some of the effects of denial lead us into isolation. It leads to anxiety, because that's our bodies is trying to tell us something.
Well, we're losing, right? We're losing sight of reality. Like we're losing not just sight, but the sense of true reality. And we're creating our own ideas, our own methods of whatever it is, right? Our situation or whatever's going on. And that can lead to destruction. It really can. It can destroy someone because you're not in tune with the truth.
The truth.
And what the facts are, what it really is. And that can be scary.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And especially when it comes out in depression, because it hits you from left field. And I mean, there was times where you were like, man, I don't even know where that came from, and I don't even know why I'm going through this. Random, just out of the blue. It could
really bring someone down. And so, if I kind of want to put this out there, I want you to ask yourself if there's anything in your life, right, that you're in denial, that you are in denial, right? Anything. Maybe it's a past situation that you don't want to face or come to reality, right? Come to kind of confront it. Maybe it's, something that I know when people go through trauma, they're not wanting to kind of go back and revisit that trauma.
Right. Nobody does.
Nobody does.
But sometimes that's the healing process begins there, of having to, for one, processing it ourselves. What had just happened to me. Right. Okay, and sometimes it's unfortunate situations, something bad. Then we have to process it, and then we have to go through our our emotions, whether it's getting angry, whether it's being sad, crying. We have to go through that. You have to allow.
I want y'all to think about this. I want you to think about when a scar, right? When you cut yourself, that scar will not go away. That scar will not go away. It'll be there, right? So you can't take it back. Like I can't, I have a scar. I can't, I mean, I'm sure with technology
Well, it
or
starts as a
surgery,
cut.
you could probably, but what I'm saying is, there's an injury there. And so you're going to have a scar that represents, and it might remind you of that injury, right? That can't be removed, but it does heal. It can heal and it will heal, right? So when you think about the mental, the spiritual scars that we face with that you can't truly see, but they're there.
Right.
Well, in order for them to be healed, right, we need to be able to face them. We need to be able to not just survive, but truly overcome.
Correct.
And be able to talk about it. And I feel like the moment that I knew that I had come out of that, right, deep depression was when I was able to stand up in front of people and share my story and what I've went through.
True.
And not be extremely emotional about it. Like, man, I just had this joy inside me that I can stand here.
Weight was lifted off your shoulders.
Absolutely. Like I can stand here and say, hey, man, this is my story or this is my situation, but here I am today.
And I know earlier you asked the question to them. You got to ask yourself, are you in denial? Sometimes you might not even know that you're in denial.
Exactly.
But there's key things here to look out for. Maybe somebody has brought certain things up to your brought them up to your attention. Because I think many times I had told you, hey, you need to go see a doctor, a therapist, or something. And you're like, no, I don't. I'm fine. And that was the beginning stages of denial. You kept telling me no. I was like, no.
I could overcome
because you started doing
this. I got this.
little things that I kind of picked up on. I was like, that's not right. And
it was a lot of it was a lot of memory, a lot of mental.
Just forgetting things
exactly.
more than usual because we all
Exactly.
forget. I'm guilty of that
at
too.
A high level, there were some flags, like some red flags,
yes,
as you would consider.
And at the beginning, you obviously brushed it off and said no, and then after a while, you were open to the idea. And I think when you finally made these appointments and went, and the doctor says, no, there is something going on, and this is what it is, you finally put your finger on what that was, and then the depression and denial and all that. I think it all came together for you. You read that book on how to deal with trauma. Excellent book. We'll recommend it. We'll put it on the link here in a bit.
Healing What's Hidden.
Healing What's Hidden, and you read that whole book, and I'm so proud of you because you never put that book down.
I don't like reading, guys.
She doesn't like reading.
The only thing I like reading is the Bible, but I don't like reading books.
But this is the one book that when you picked up, you didn't put down, and I'm so proud of you for reading it from beginning to end. But
thank you.
Yes, but you were sharing so much with me, so it's like I almost read the book with you because as you were reading, oh wow, check this out, and it made sense to you, and you learned so much from it, and I think it equipped you, and it gave you tools and perspectives on things that you knew, but you hadn't put your finger on, so to speak, because you were again surviving and not overcoming. Yeah. And now I think, I'm glad you shared. This is a large testimony you just shared with everybody here, but I was with you through the whole process. I got to see that, and I seen the growth. I seen that you're in a better place today than ever before. She doesn't forget much now, guys. So she doesn't.
I feel like my mind is sharp again.
No, she definitely is, and I can't get away with a lot of things. I was like, man, she don't forget.
I sure don't. No, but you mentioned a key thing, and we want to leave you with this. You mentioned, going through this process with therapy, getting closer to God. Right. It's, here's the thing: we're gonna face adversity. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be things that happen in our life that we might not ever know why it happened or get the answers that we want or get the outcomes that we want, right? And they might negatively affect us, right? Whether it's emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally. But when you seek the help, right? When you seek help, it's all about, it's not about like, okay, everything's just going to go away and you're going to be 100%, right? Because that's a false expectation. That is not reality. But it's about, you said it, getting the tools, right? Getting the tools and knowing how to use those tools to help you manage, cope, overcome.
Right.
And that's what it is. You know, having a relationship with God, well, guess what? Man, we have a lot of tools.
That's our best therapist,
that is our best
counselor,
therapist. And man, you have
everything,
all the tools to be able to overcome. But we also, God uses doctors for a reason, and they're placed there to also, if you find the right one, and that's what we're also here for. So we want to connect you. If you need help, we're here to connect you to the right people.
And there's not
right
one
contact.
one fix all either.
It's not.
So
You
the
might
first
see different
you might have to
types
try
of-
different
Exactly.
before you find the right one that
Exactly.
works.
And so, but we're here with you.
But don't give up.
Don't give up.
Stay in the fight.
Absolutely. Stay in the fight. Yeah.
And you are great at that. You stayed in the fight. Even through your adversities, you were in the fight. Even if it meant putting up a front and putting on a smile on the days that Mari wasn't feeling her 100%.
Yeah.
You were great at that. But now you don't have to put on that front. Now the smile, I mean, I think you went from happiness to joyful now.
Absolutely. I am
that's the difference.
100% joyful.
That's amen to that, right?
Amen.
So, and I got to see that, and I got to experience and go through that with you as far as that goes, because again, husband and wife, right? And we got to help each other out and be there for one another.
So
And
we encourage you,
That's
you know, we've been sharing, of course, our testimony, our story, our struggles, but we encourage you to really kind of take a dig deeper, right? Kind of dig deeper to identify if there's something that you have not realized. Okay, I am in denial with this, right? There is something.
Whether it's addiction,
defense, there's the defense mechanism, a wall that's there that doesn't want to face reality. Whatever it is, addiction. You know, whether it's maybe a situation, a traumatic event in your life, whatever that is, seek help. We're here to help you, and there is a way to be able to overcome. But you have to first, in order for you to want to overcome and move forward, you first have to face, right? Reality and acknowledge the situation. And, so if that neuropsychologist would have said, hey, Mari, well, you're in denial. And I'd have been like, well, no, I'm not. And I would have just continued to live life. Well, guess what? You have a decision to make. You could either acknowledge it or you could ignore it. So we appreciate you. Like us, follow us, share us, and, tune in. Leave any comments. But thank you for tuning in to Faith Connections, where we connect you to your faith.